two, 1, 2, 3.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. I'm here today with Dario Azzellini. He's a research fellow in ILR at Cornell, and today we're going to be talking about Venezuelan communes. So, Dario Azzellini, maybe you could say just a little bit about your background.
Yes, hello, Teresa, and hello to all the listeners and viewers and etc. A little bit to my background is really complicated, but yes, I am originally from Italian family, grew up in Germany, lived half of my adult life in Latin America and the Caribbean in several countries, from Nicaragua to Colombia to Mexico to Venezuela. I studied one PhD in Frankfurt and then the second one in Mexico in Puebla, and I lived between 4 and 8 months a year in Venezuela between 2003 and 2012, and then obviously I kept in touch and everything. And one of my PhDs was on the local self-government structures, which are the communes. And my research is concentrated mainly on like local self-management or self-government and workers self-management and workers' takeovers and new workers' struggles. If you want to look at my website, it's just my last name, azzellini.net, and I publish in several languages. Books are translated into several languages, and you find films. I also do documentary films. There's one long one on communes too.
That's very good, and it's very encouraging because I think it establishes that you are fluent in Spanish, unlike some American researchers and many American journalists who claim to be bringing us the information from the area.
I'm actually even certified translator for German, Spanish, and Italian, simultaneous translator and consecutive translator and written translator. So it's like, of all languages I speak, English is probably the worst.
Maybe also by way of introduction, you could give a 2-minute historical sketch about recent Venezuelan history, just pinning down kind of the framework.
So Venezuela had a dictatorship until 1958. It was overthrown by leftist government, unions, workers' movements, but then some bourgeois, US-oriented parties came in government that built up some kind of authoritarian two-party system. Was pretty impossible to do anything outside this two-party system, which controlled everything. And it was a country living off oil revenues. It's like the country in the world with the biggest oil reserves, and beyond that, also several other very important natural resources like lithium, like aluminum, like bauxite, and many, many others. So it is a country which is of high interest in the political, geopolitical game. And the neoliberalism and the crisis of the 90s, 80s, and 90s led to great poverty, and that led the movements to grow, and then Chavez as a leftist military, which is like interesting, but it's a specific Venezuelan trait that there's always a strong leftist current in the military. Took power, was elected president in 1999, and took power. Had the support of leftist parties, movements, etc. There was a very interesting development until Chavez death in 2013, but the further they turned themselves against the powerful nations in the world, especially the US, and the more they tried to build up, so from 2007 on, they argued like turn to socialism, and the more they tried that, the more they were object of international campaigns, blockades. There are billions and billions of Venezuelan assets around the world that have just been confiscated without like any legal base. The US confiscated Citgo, which is 100% Venezuelan state property. And so the refineries and everything that is Citgo structures in the US has been simply confiscated by the US government and handed over to the representatives of the Venezuelan opposition, which is like a totally absurd thing. So when people argue Venezuela is rich in oil, why are the people poor? Well, they're poor because like the crisis that is right now is a consequence of this international acts. So now, after Chavez died in 2013, his successor, Nicolas Maduro, took over. And there's a very controversial debate, but there's no doubt, like, controversial debate, what are the reasons for what happened? Is it like only the external pressure, the blockades, and etc., or is it also internal mistakes and errors, etc.? But there's no doubt that, like, obviously the crisis hit the country hard, and also, like, many of the initiatives that were there to increase people's power, to build like cooperatives, workers' control, etc., were like aborted with time, or reduced a lot in favor of a more controlling state, and also like the disappearance of Chavez as uniting figures scattered a bit the left in all kinds of directions and different interpretations. So to say it in a rather balanced way, Venezuela resisted so far to be invaded by the US, but
we tried a couple of times.
There's a huge crisis, without any doubt, a huge economic crisis, which is, I think, in mainly a consequence of the international blockade and etc., but also a consequence of internal mistakes. But there is also an increasing, I would say, tendency to consolidate, like, to the rule of the government and the one party, and to not take into considerations any like critics, not even from the left. Everything in this like tense situation is considered an attack, and this creates big contradictions also inside the movements and inside the country. Nevertheless, the communes, these spaces of self-government, local self-government I will be talking about, are spaces that still exist and that still are the ones that have been handling best the situation of crisis.
Okay, good for the background. And let us now turn to the communes, though I will mention that when I tried to prepare for this interview, I found myself reading an article in Dollars and Cents, a pretty respectable journal, I think, popular journal, that was about Venezuelan cooperatives. So was I off topic? Maybe you could explain that distinction. No. Okay, yes. That's a good distinction to start with.
Yes and no. So the cooperatives are the workplaces. The communes is a structure of local self-government. So they are built on, and they're like, well, it started in around 2005, 2006, that they tried even earlier to build up local self-government on a very small structure, combining organizations in the neighborhoods and institutions. That didn't work because like this balance of power made the institutional side so strong that in the end they were deciding about everything. So then the consequence was like to set up the communal councils as a system. Communal council is practically the assembly of the neighborhood, which consists in urban spaces of 100 to 250 living units, in rural spaces around like 30, 40, and in indigenous areas 10 to 20, 30. Because obviously people are more scattered, or the units are also bigger.
So
and
they're
they
really small.
They're small, and they build like
smaller than a high-rise apartment building. It sounds to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, 250 units in a city. It could be one building that makes, for example, this. But I mean, they have very few of these like big buildings.
No, I'm just trying to get this. I'm
there are
trying
few
to
in
measure
Caracas.
the scope in terms of something that might be familiar to us here.
Yeah. So the idea is that, and it's the neighborhoods themselves that decide about the geography. So it's the relational space and not the institutional space that counts. So which is my neighborhood, where I'm moving, who am I connected to? These communal councils is practically the assembly of the people living there. And they also build then work groups about the issues that are interesting for them, and it's themselves. They decide themselves what they want to decide on and develop projects. So they might have like a health committee or a cultural committee or a construction committee or whatever, and they then elaborate in these groups, in these work groups, in these committees, they elaborate projects. The communal council, which is again the assembly of all these people, decides then on the priorities, and these projects are then presented to the authorities for financing, and they get the money to do these things. So it's like completely like self-organized and not representative, but direct democracy. So this is the important thing. And it's not a party system, like people act as people and as collective, but not along any like party lines or whatever. It's not that you vote for parties, you vote for spokespeople, but these spokespeople of the committees cannot decide anything. They're just spokespeople that then like speak for the committee, present the project, and etc. The next level is then the commune. So the commune consists out of, in urban spaces, out of 30, 40 communal councils. So it's a much bigger area that can also present bigger projects. What is the connection to the cooperatives? Well, that obviously the communal councils and communes that are better organized or longer organized or etc., they build also communal cooperatives. So this is a special thing that after like the experience of promoting cooperatives in Venezuela, but then the result was often that these cooperatives were not necessarily working for the best of the community, but rather looking which were the best market niches or in how to insert into the market. So the idea that came up then later was like about these communal socialist or social enterprises, they were called. And this is like cooperatives that are set up like it's the community that decides what they need, what they want. And the workers in the cooperative decide on the concrete labor processes, obviously, because it's what they know. But what kind of cooperative to build and what to do in a big picture with the cooperative is a community decision, not only of the workers in the cooperatives. So this would be the connection. Now you might ask, what kind of cooperatives might there be, or communal enterprises? Well, there are all kinds of. There are communes that are so well organized, they took over abandoned factories and started producing animal feed or textile production or prefabricated houses or kinds of things you might find in the neighborhoods, small cooperatives that are like shoemakers or packing medicine, or there are a lot bakeries, or any kind of food processing, all kinds. I mean, it's the communities that decide what they need and what they want and what they set up. So this is like the idea. So the communes also present then projects, and again, they don't take the communes. They're not following the idea of a representative democracy. So it's not that people like the delegates in the communes that decide on what the communal councils or the commune is doing, but again, the communal councils send spokespeople to the commune. But not only the communal councils, but also other political and social organizations that are existing on the territory, which could be like a local radio or the women's organization or the whatever, can be part of the commune structure and do planning on a higher level than you can do in a small communal councils. So you have these like bigger projects of like overarching cooperatives or taking over a whole factory, or like all these things are done on a commune level. So now you might ask, how many communes and how many communal councils are we talking about in Venezuela? Well, we're talking about registered 47,000 communal councils, so small local assemblies, and out of that, some 1,700 communes that exist over the national territory. Now, do they all function and work as real assemblies and democracy from the bottom up and self? No, obviously not.
Yeah.
I mean,
there is
like, yeah.
My question was going to be, so is every Venezuelan a member of some communal council or other, at least in theory? So some areas are not organized in this way.
No, if they didn't organize, they're not organized.
Okay.
Then there are like, and to look back and say, okay, and that's also the issue. When they started, it was a mechanism to get a lot of like financing from the state. But with the crisis, the money that they could like get for like different projects went down extremely. So, and that also like kind of cleaned a bit the picture, because the communal councils that were only there to grab money disappeared practically. So they might still be registered, but they're not really there. They're not really organizing. They don't do assemblies. They don't present any projects anymore, because they only were able to present stuff they could get money for. While others that are well organized and, for example, like building cooperatives and thinking in alternatives that they can develop themselves without the need of the institutional, the state funding, but really like progressing on their own feet and legs, they still exist. Then you have might have some, like it is always, and every activist knows that, some might be just based on the work of some activists that are very like doing a lot of work. The others agree, but they're not really active. Yes, they might not at the assembly, and that's it. Yes. And others have really active assemblies, work groups, and etc. So this is like the picture that there is right now. So if we talk about 1,700 communes, it's not 1,700 really super organized self-government structures. So first of all, it's on different levels, because they decide according to their capacities and needs what they want to do and decide on and work on, and etc. So there's probably like a huge part that doesn't exist only on paper. There's another part that just does what the institution says, because obviously the institution has the state has an interest to use them as kind of prolonged institution, while the idea is that they are independent from the state. I mean, which does not mean that they don't get money, because I mean the money is coming out of the wealth of the country. So why shouldn't they take the money? Yeah, but So there is a constant contradiction and conflict also between conflict and cooperation between institutions and communes and communal councils. And then there are others that are like in this constant contradiction, but developing really huge structures and self-government structures. There are several communes on the countryside, like El Maizal, for example, which is a very big commune between, like in the region of Lara, which is one of the regions. It's an agricultural commune built on expropriated land that Chavez expropriated from the government, expropriated from great land owners. And they, for example, have a huge production of all kinds of vegetables. Then they took over some facilities in greenhouses a nearby university had, and were completely neglected by the university. So together with the workers from there, they took them over, they occupied them, and started reworking them. They have now they can have their own food production, which is like good for themselves and also to sell beyond that. In better times, in financially better times, they were able to build schools, to build all kinds of stuff there. And they're also part of building a political coordination of cooperatives, because they think that they should have known political organization beyond any party or state structure. And that's what they are doing right now. There are also urban cooperatives that are working very well and have, like, from food processing to pharmacies to bakeries and all kinds of local organization, and really like strong self-governing structures. We have to say that it is, among all the communes, it is a minority that works that well, but it is a minority that is showing how can we build socialism for the people, from the people, with the original idea that socialism was before the state came up, which was the commune, the Paris Commune. So the only thing that Marx knew when he wrote his works, there was no state revolution. The only revolution he knew was the Paris Commune. Yes, and in fact, he says when he analyzes the Paris Commune, he's like, hurrah! Hooray! This state does not exist anymore. It's just government. Yeah, and so this was like his idea of the superation of the state. And he also says, at a certain point, he says, because few people know that, like, Paris Commune is the best known one, but there were communes in other places in France that came up. They were mostly then like crushed earlier than the Paris Commune, but there were communes in many different places. And the idea of the commune was to create a federation of communes. So Marx sees that, analyzes all that, and says, look, a national coordination of cooperatives under workers' control. What else is that than real communism? So this is what he identifies as communism, as the idea of communism, is the commune, is the workers' control, is the self-organization. It is not what came up then later, the idea of focusing on the state.
Right.
There are for sure political, strategic, and etc. reasons why all that happened. I'm not saying, oh, damn, they are, but I mean, this is like the original idea that came up, and it's what's happening not just in Venezuela. It's happening in always according to the local context and to the national context, to the possibilities. Remember, Marx said, you're doing the revolution under the circumstances you find, not the ones you wish. Yeah. So, so we have like similar structures that can be called commune structures. We find them in Chiapas, in the indigenous communities in Chiapas, in other indigenous communities around Mexico, like Guerrero and Oaxaca. We find them in Rojava in Kurdistan, where people do organize in a very similar way, also calling, they call it, it's interesting because the smaller structure is called commune there, and the bigger one is called the council, but like the opposite of Venezuela. But like we have these things, and this is the way people organize structurally when they can decide themselves. We can also see all the movements after 2010. It was much smaller scale and only for a short time, but the occupied plazas, be it in Occupy US, be it in Greece, be it in Spain, what were they? They were examples of communes, yes?
Well,
where people organized.
I'll question that a little bit, having occasionally been been out with Occupy Ithaca, came together for a while, but then went home. I mean, every night went home to bed.
Okay. Well, no, I mean the
so
constant.
It didn't, but I did have a really funny thought. I wonder whether you got this in some of the pioneer wagon trains. Somebody ought to look into that.
No, I don't have about that, but we could look at other examples. Would be like the maroon establishments, like the maroon cities, for example, all around the Americas, that were organized by self-freed slaves. This would be another example for communes. Yes, we have, and there historically there are many examples for like this kind of self-organizing based on the idea of a commune that does not separate the political, the economic, and the social, and that does not create different spheres around it, and that does not delegate decisions and power to others, but where democracy is, because power is where the people are.
So that sounds like an excellent idea. In fact, I think that's, if we had, I was again fantasizing, if we here had communes, they would deal with snow removal, though there's probably no precedent for that in Venezuela. Well,
so there are in the Andes, there is snow, yes, in the Andean mountains, but I don't think that they have to deal that much with snow removal.
Well, thank you, Dario Azzellini, for telling us so much about Venezuelan communes. Someday you will have to come back and tell us about Venezuelan cooperatives. This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Thanks for watching.